So before I get started, I want to let everyone know that the volume is going to be different as soon as this portion of the video is over. I have gotten some complaints that the volume for the videos are a little bit too low. So I will be raising the volume just a tad going forward. I am letting you guys know from here before the volume changes. That way your eardrums don't get randomly blasted. The changes will be going into effect in 3, 2, 1. Good day, everyone. Welcome to the next episode. Due to popular demand, I will be adding a recap going forward. These recap sections are going to be really rough overviews. I'm going to keep these as short as possible, and until I can afford to get some help with making videos, I will not be adding any more additions going forward. If you really need a refresher of events, I will ask you watch or skim the previous episodes. As a reminder, I always put down resources of other ways you can learn about Ghost Frontline at a more controlled pace. Thank you as always, and now let's start the recap. In the previous episode, Griffin had roughly 2 weeks to recover from Operation Polarized Light. Since then, Hellion and Kruger returned. Perska decided to move to the Griffin base, and Nataline temporarily joined Griffin. With M4 and M16 gone, RO-635 has returned to being the leader of the AR team and got a body upgrade. After getting a call from Javier, the commander was ordered to assist Angelia in her investigation into William. This led the AR team, Squad 404, and various Griffin T-Dolls encountering multiple SF ringleaders. Through various actions, all ringleaders were tagged for eventual capture. This ends with the AR team and Dandelion showing the commander a mansion in Germany, suggesting that Lunacia used to live there. The commander promised the AR team that they'll get M4 and M16 back together. Meanwhile, Angelia and Task Force Defy investigate Bremen, Germany, looking for William. They are assisted by Agent K and Chairwoman Ulrich, who assigned Secretary Mordo Voigt and Agent Hobbs as her protective detail. They first investigated a research institution and met with biologist Leone. She set up a trap and tried to escape, but RPK-16 tracked her down and tortured her so much that Leone tried to shoot herself to stop the pain. After that, Angelia met with Agent J, who helped look into a man named Powell, a wealthy preacher who earned the subservience of Bremen's refugee camp. The group investigated him, and this led to a mass uprising, with Powell using floral substance to turn refugees into elites. Agent Hobbs eventually goes turncoat to support Powell, but is stopped by Defy. After this, Angelia and Mordo bonded over their trials, but Mordo reveals herself as a Paradox plant and is a Nido. She escapes, leaving Angelia and Defy to survive a crash landing in an aircraft. That's where we left off. Before we get into the summary proper, I'd like to ask everyone watching to please subscribe, like the video, and consider becoming a member to support the channel. Now, let's get started. Immediately after AK-12 landed the aircraft that was spiraling out of control, the German police captured Angelia. Afterwards, Angelia has been in and out of consciousness as she was in holding. She was deprived of any hospitality until 2 Stasi agents stepped in and began to beat her repeatedly. They'd done far more than that as well, including forcing her to drown and slowly slicing her skin. The torture went on for so long that Angelia had lost track of time, and she fell unconscious and thought back to long-forgotten memories of her childhood, only to be violently awoken for another session of beatings. But why were the Stasi doing this to her? On paper, it was for the death of Mordo. Even though Angelia had said repeatedly that she was a Paradox spy, there was no proof of that. However, that wasn't the real reason she was being beaten. The real reason is because they want to know what Angelia found in the Paldivsky submarine base. Once the Stasi tipped their hand, Angelia couldn't help but be amused. They went through all this trouble just because they wanted to hunt some relics? Her respect for the Stasi were at an all-time low. And once she made that clear, the agents proceeded to pull out their blades to give her some new scars. Except they were immediately halted by the director. Shortly afterwards, Angelia was taken to a hotel room and thrown inside. Once there, she met AN-94, who immediately expressed concern for her. Shortly afterwards, the rest of Task Force Defy was escorted into the room. While AK-12 is typically very nonchalant, the very sight of Angelia's broken state made her personality do a complete 180. Her murderous intent shot through the roof. Before AK-12 could run back to hunt down Stasi, Angelia quickly told her to stand down. Even doing this caused her wounds to tear and start bleeding. This did cause AK-12 to snap back to reality though, as she and 94 focused on stabilizing her. But before they could make any real headway, a Stasi agent walked in to tell them that they needed to leave and go to their assigned apartment. Angelia was released from holding, but she was still under investigation. She is not allowed to leave Berlin and needed to follow the curfew rules. After being kicked out of the room, it was very clear to see that Angelia was in terrible shape. She looked like she could collapse if the wind pushed her too hard. She was informed that 48 hours had passed since her arrest, and Angelia was confident that she was indeed tortured for 48 hours straight. AK-12 was doing her best to hold back her rage, but Angelia was just glad to see the sun again. To her, it felt a lot longer than 48 hours. After she took a moment to mentally compose herself, she brought up a very important question. Why was she released all of a sudden? Not only did the Stasi not get what they wanted, but all of the 5 were given their weapons back. RPK checked on their vitals and confirmed that they were not tampered with either. So aside from being locked in Berlin, they got off scot-free. 94 brought up the idea of Ulrich pulling some strings, but Angelia knew that couldn't have been the case. Angelia got framed for not only killing Mordo, but also causing the hell that was raised in Bremen. Ulrich couldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. So whoever let them go has to be involved in some way, and they have enough authority that even the Stasi would not go against them. Despite all this thinking, RPK decided to make note that Angelia is in no condition to do any sort of investigation, and AK-12 immediately echoed this. Angelia protested, but AK-12 assured her that there was no rush. Their target is already long gone, and if it weren't for their early release, they would still be in holding right now. So, rest is the best option. With logic working against her, Angelia submitted to her doll's concerns. Angelia would require at least a week of rest to be fully healed. But everyone knew she would be too bullheaded for that, so they settled for a night's rest. And AK-12 did her best to patch her up overnight and feed her what she needed. During this, RPK gathered more information and learned that the apartment complex they were in had nothing but Stasi agents. Furthermore, their room was filled with so many bugs and cameras that they could open a store selling them. They couldn't find any clues on what to do next, other than what RPK found. More specifically, RPK was given a message through her network, and it was untraceable. The message was meant for Angelia, apologizing for meddling into her affairs, but quickly informs her that what happened was due to the Stasi being compromised. They then tell her to meet at a location and to enjoy the apartment. It was clear that this was Angelia's savior. She hated the idea of meeting someone who had so much power, yet chose to remain in the shadows. But with everything else being a dead end, she chose to accept this offer. Angelia and Defy spent an excessive amount of time shaking off the Stasi agents, but eventually Angelia made it to the bar called a Venus Owl. Once inside, she sat at a table, occupied by a man who was clearly expecting a partner. The man was well-dressed, composed, and looked completely in control. The moment he greeted her, it was clear he was British. In fact, he was stereotypically so. He gave away that he indeed is the one who got her out of holding, but nothing more than that. This bothered Angelia greatly, and her paranoia was rising. But then, the man said something that caught her off guard. "Angelia, we are constantly deluding ourselves into thinking that the world is getting back on track, but the truth is staring us right in the face. There is still too much hidden darkness. And where there is darkness, there is tragedy like what happened in Beslan. If all things were bright and beautiful in the world, why would your parents suffer such a terrible fate?" For context, Beslan is Angelia's hometown. This revelation raised alarm bells in Angelia's mind, and she stood up in defiance. But before she could do anything else, she felt an intense killing intent. Not from the man, but literally every person inside the bar. She realized there wasn't a single soul here that was just a customer. And if she made any wrong move, she would be gunned down in an instant. Even further, this man was speaking to her in such a composed and measured way that he may even be able to kill her himself. Realizing her predicament, she calmed down. This caused everyone to go back to having a good time. Angelia began to realize who this man really was. Director Zelinsky from StateSec directed her to Germany, precisely to fall in his jurisdiction. He's not a StateSec agent, but he may even be more powerful than Zelinsky himself. Not only did he know her true history, but he was even more violent than she was. But perhaps the smoking gun, to her, was the idea that he is doing all of this for the sake of the Resartress. Regardless, she did not dare utter his name. That may be the most dangerous thing to do in a situation. Instead, she took his offer and received his information. He confirmed a few of her suspicions. Paradis is deep in Germany and is reaching a critical point. However, what Angelia did not expect is their lack of political power. All Paradis has been doing is promoting civil unrest and riots. This means their goal is insurrection, and the man confirms this is because there is a pivotal moment in history that is incoming, and they want to stop it. He, however, refused to elaborate on what this is. What he focused on instead is Paradis will launch a terrorist attack, and it will be through bioweapons. Angelia realized what he meant by that, understanding that the same gas grenades that Powell used fit the bill. This meant that her first lead would be to interrogate Leone. Fortunately for her, she has coincidentally been escorted to Berlin around the same time Angelia has been in holding. For all intents and purposes, Angelia got her objective. But she wanted one more thing: the address to a mansion. During RPK's investigation, she managed to scour Mordo's apartment. She was not able to find much, but she did find a photo of a mansion. Knowing Mordo is her best lead to William, she wanted the address to that mansion. This very dangerous British man told her that is irrelevant to her current objective. But Angelia wouldn't budge on this. So he decided he would give her the information when she completes the objective and tells her to learn to pick her battles. There are some things that are out of her league. Finally, there was one last gift that she pushes to Angelia. He informs her that the Griffin commander is incoming to Germany, and although they will have different objectives, he was sure that she is very happy to have the commander's support. Angelia did not protest this, and shortly after, she left the bar. During this time, the commander was hard at work at the Griffin base. With Paradis at large, he had been training the dolls to fight against their seemingly unbeatable enemies, with the goal of ensuring a slaughter like Operation Polarized Light will never happen again. This rigorous training, however, was interrupted by Kruger. It was time for a very serious discussion. Kruger spoke about the commander's original reason he was assigned here, to stop SF from overrunning the region. Now, SF pales in comparison to the military, and now Paradis. While he is proud of the commander, he has to admit that their efforts did very little in the grand scheme of things. But with every setback comes new opportunity. Kruger informed the commander that Angelia made a lot of headway in her investigation, but his next objective will have little to do with her. His immediate accomplishments, especially during Operation Polarized Light, caught the eye of a certain someone. Kruger gave him an envelope, sealed with the emblem of Griffin and Kruger. Kruger then reminded the commander of what their PMC is called. Kruger is one half, and Griffin is the other. However, he warned the commander that he should call him the Earl. And with that, the commander understood the gravity of the situation. Griffin, or rather the Earl, has summoned him to Germany, and he will be under his direct supervision. And he would not have time to prepare. he is being summoned at this very instant. But this very much was not a good time. A few days ago, there was an incident. As more and more work began to pile up, things began to return to its very hectic schedule. But during these moments of chaos, Kalina had forced the commander to do his routine checkup at the hospital. But while the commander came out perfectly fine, Kalina had become completely bedridden. With her adrenaline now gone, it was clear she became very ill. She was so tired that she could no longer move, and staying awake was near impossible. She developed a cold as well as a very high fever. With her showing very bad symptoms, the commander carried her to the doctor. A rudimentary check showed that she was suffering from severe exhaustion, and this was like a gut punch to the commander. He was so used to Kalina's high energy that he once again took her for granted, and he wanted to be the first one she would see when she wakes up and is discharged. But after expressing this to Kruger, he sternly told him that he knows it is a bad time, hinting that the commander doesn't get to choose to sit this one out. You don't say no to the Earl. Kruger does know that this situation is unfair, but the commander assured him that he knew what he was getting into when he declined the civilian life. With that, Kruger gives him one last piece of advice. Trust no one, even him, and especially the Earl. The commander rounded up the AR team. Dandelion was also assigned to the operation after Kruger strongly suggested it. Their mission is to go to Germany and capture the Paradus agent Moradel. Before they depart, the commander gets a message from the hospital. It's the latest report on Kalina's condition. The doctor let the commander know that she is showing mild symptoms of an eyelid infection. This hit the commander like a ton of bricks. His hand trembled as he called Kalina's number, hoping she would answer, but it went straight to voicemail. Submitting to the situation, the commander left a message, asking her to wait for him to return. They were sent to a small town named Bonsdorf, which was next to Berlin. From there, it was easily detected that there were many Paradus units hidden in plain sight. Furthermore, the villagers in Bonsdorf worked very much like a cult. They have rejected modern technology in search of salvation from God. In reality though, it seems many of the villagers are suffering from eyelid, and they were looking for a way to be restored. In order to locate Mordo, the commander decided to go undercover as a homeless person, adopting the name Robin. The AR team and Dandelion remained on standby outside of the village. After a few days of undercover work, he eventually saw what everyone called the village saint. She was being held as the most vital part of the community, as she, apparently, had the ability to cure eyelid infection. This was the entire foundation of Paradus' teachings. All who believe in false gods shall be punished by the Lord. Helping sinners also make you a sinner. All must survive through the body given to us by the Lord. Paradus is God. Furthermore, Dandelion had infiltrated as a wealthy girl. This is where Dandelion revealed that this village is all staged. It's not a poor village at all. The wealthy people around her were using cameras and phones to spy on the villagers for entertainment, as if this was a reality TV show. Furthermore, this place was also being used as a gentleman's club. Entertainment dolls were also here, and the things that were going on near Dandelion was not for the faint of heart. As Dandelion put it, the place is a circus. As terrible as this was, the commander held back his real thoughts on the situation and focused on the mission at hand. He was starting to doubt that Mordo was here, and the only person of interest at this point was the Saint. But the longer this went on, the more worried RO became for the commander's safety. She wanted to pull him out, but the commander assured her that he'll be okay. As soon as he got the chance, he strayed away from his group of refugees and followed the Saint and the village elder. This led to him listening in on their brief conversation. The Saint seems devoted to healing the infected and has a selfish view of the world. On the other hand, the elder was practically worshipping the ground she walked on. They then got to what was supposedly a ward for the sickly. only to find that wasn't it at all. The Saint was immediately bombarded with many flashes of light from cameras and phones, and she was quickly surrounded by the wealthy people, eager to see her up close and personal. While the Saint was disoriented from this sudden ambush, the elder explained to her that she has devoted her life to curing the infected. What she must do now is simply another way of doing that. At this point, it was extremely alarming to the commander what was going on here. The rich had paid large sums of money to get a very close and personal look at the Saint. And if they had their way, it'll go way beyond just looking. The Saint did not want to engage in such activity, but the elder looked on in encouragement, and these lustful men had her cornered. After hearing her cries for help, the commander had enough. He practically ripped the hinges off the door and barreled his way to the Saint, taking her hand and told her to escape with him. The commander quickly alerted the AR team and Dandelion, and they all provided support. Upon managing to escape the village, the commander was forced to deem the mission a failure. However, the AR team stopped the commander as they noticed something near miraculous. The Saint's hood fell back as she was running, and her face was revealed. It was Morido. Or was it? She called herself Moklian. Before the commander could make sense of the situation, Moklian realized the commander, or as she knew him, Robin, was not some homeless person, and she became frightened, pulling out a knife. Her stance was nothing like an assassin, and her eyes were full of fear. In fact, she was so helpless that Satma simply struck her from behind and knocked her out, which annoyed the commander, but at least the situation was now under control. Shortly after, Dandelion joined the group, actually quite angered by what she witnessed from the wealthy, and she had to hold herself back from killing them all herself. All of that disgust aside though, they had to leave immediately. Paradus had massive amounts of reinforcements gunning for them, and fighting them head-on was not an option. After getting into their escape truck, the AR team held off Paradus for some time while they drove away, but eventually the tires were slashed and they were forced to abandon the truck. After being tracked down, Griffin made their stand and held off Paradus, while the commander protected Moklian. Fortunately, a lifeline appeared as Commander's communicator came to life, and T-Dolls from the Earl made themselves known and moved in to assist. With their help, Commander and his group managed to pave a way and escape into Berlin, which is where Paradus was seemingly not allowed to invade. Reaching Berlin, the commander was escorted to a large building. The Earl's T-Dolls allowed it inside, but only him. Once inside, a holographic image of a man appeared in front of him, a tall and imposing man. The commander greeted him as the Earl, but his efforts have granted him special privilege. The commander is allowed to call him by his real name, Griffin Lyons. The second half, and perhaps the stronger half of the PMC. From this point forward, I will be referring to Griffin as the Earl, just to keep things clear. The Earl told the commander that he had expected him to have a much more hardened and bloodthirsty aura, but it was clear that he was still a kind and young soldier. This realization made him eager to see why Kruger speaks of him so highly. The commander, starstruck, was just as eager to prove himself. Then they got to the main subject. The Earl informed him of Moklian and stated that the commander was correct in his assumption that Moklian and Morido are not the same person, which means Morido, the agent of Paradus, is still at large. This begs several questions. Who is Moklian? Why does she look exactly like Morido? Why is she so important to Paradus? And how does she fit in Paradus's plan for Germany? The commander's objective is to figure all of that out. The Earl then informs him that Angelia is also in Berlin, and he has arranged for the two to finally meet in person so they can compare notes. Once the commander is completely caught up, he will be the Earl's front-running agent in Germany. The commander took the opportunity to inquire more about William, to which the Earl stated he doesn't know much. But what he does know is he is very important. There's no other way he could orchestrate so many moves. The Earl had built a base of operations precisely to investigate William himself, and he hopes the commander's findings will assist him to that end. The Earl then provided an FOB, as well as his dolls, called Squad Griffin, to the commander for further assistance, knowing that he will have many hard fights ahead of him. But before they could adjourn their meeting, the commander felt apprehensive. The Earl wondered if this was because he felt overwhelmed, but the commander assured him that he was up for the task. The commander just wasn't sure what he was doing was in fact the right thing to do. Now that he is speaking to the Earl, he couldn't help but to ask him about their slogan, "A shining beacon in a brave new world." This is the exact slogan of the Resartress movement. The Earl confirmed that was intentional, and it was indeed because both Kruger and himself are Resartress, and they believe in bringing the world together under one banner. This led to the commander expressing these statements to the Earl. "I thought about what I ought to be doing. How could I help our country, our society, and our world free itself from the crappy circumstances we're in? Resartrism paints a beautiful picture of the world, but can people really unite and understand each other?" The Earl understood the commander's misgivings, and thus he answered with full honesty. "My answer is, they cannot. Men will never be able to stand united or understand each other forever. That is why this world needs order. It needs rules that will force them to unite, to guide them towards understanding each other. Those who cause division must be punished. Those who help each other must be rewarded. Only the existence of such behavior-shaping rules will allow mankind to right its wrongs and return the world to its intended order." Mr. Resartre was a great pioneer, but he was an idealist. Idealism cannot help us build an ideal world. We must take responsibility for the consequences of our actions. We must build a world order that benefits all of humanity, and to that end, we will pay any price. The commander couldn't help but feel shocked by this answer. The Earl's plan was not to bring the world together through harmony, but ridding the world of all those that stood against his ideals. Though Griffin clarified it was not his ideals, but rather the ideals of all of mankind. Still, the commander could feel himself buckling under the weight of this reality. He asked the Earl if they were successful and indeed bring the world together, would justice and decency be sacrificed along the way? The Earl ended up answering this with a fable. "The hedgehog, who serves absolute truth, reduces the world to one organizing principle, raises his spines all over, and staunchly resists all other views. The cunning and mercurial fox rides the waves of tumultuous times, narrowing his eyes and discerning the discordant voices that can reshape the world." The question to the commander is he a fox or a hedgehog? That is something that he has to figure out for himself. With all of this laid bare, the Earl adjourned the meeting and awaited the commander's eventual good news. Shortly after this, the commander received a message. It was from Angelia. He knew he had many questions, and so did she. It was time for them to finally meet. Sometime past this, Angelia awoke from her slumber in her assigned apartment. Next to her is AK-12, who told her that the commander got in touch, receiving her message. With the meeting now set, it was time for her to get ready. But before things went underway, Angelia asked AK-12 what she thought about the new agent they ran into. The night before, right after Angelia's meeting with the Earl, she had ran into a young Stasi agent named Light. Being high-strung during the time, Angelia fought against the agent in hand-to-hand combat, but he was able to hold his own and tell her that he was not an enemy. In fact, he was assigned to be her assistant. When everyone got back together, it was learned that Agent J was also assigned to help Angelia, but due to his injuries, he left everything to Agent Light. He had single-handedly led the operation on keeping track of Angelia and the Phi, while not overstepping his bounds. He also single-handedly looked into Leone, Hobbs, and Powell. All three of them were arrested, but Leone was released due to mental illness and put into a psychiatric hospital. Angelia couldn't deny that this was useful information for her next move, and thanks to that, her paranoia was lessened. AK-12's take on Light was that he was everything he advertised himself to be: efficient, capable, and well-mannered. She would even say that he can't be trusted. Angelia couldn't help but agree, but that only made her more paranoid. As for a time, she felt the same way about Mordo. But as it stood at that very moment, her concerns were more on the Earl, as it was a shock that he even revealed himself in the first place. She couldn't pin down what was truly going on, but the Earl's personal involvement made her head spin. Frankly speaking, her only suspect is Leone, who is now in a heavily guarded hospital. Angelia is also still battered and under extremely heavy surveillance. For all intents and purposes, her only lifeline now is the commander. AK-12 was certain that she was eager to meet him for other reasons, but Angelia did not humor this. Going back to the commander, he and the dolls were getting settled in their temporary outpost. During this time, AR-15 approached the commander and advised him to interrogate Moklian. In her view, it's very possible that Moklian is indeed a dangerous Nido, if not Mordo herself. While the commander showed her concern, the fact is they've already confirmed that Moklian is in no shape to answer questions right now. Instead, Squad Griffin and Dandelion would keep watch of her while the rest of them heads to Athena's Owl to meet Angelia. But before they could leave, they got a call from UMP-45. Turns out, Hellion personally paid Squad 404 to join the commander and aid him in Berlin. Along with that, Kalina had awoken, and she left a very angry message for the commander, calling him a great big dummy for not being next to her when she woke up. And she's going to spend all of his money when she feels all better. As demented as this was, the commander took this as her being okay for now. With that weight off his mind, he assigned Squad 404 to scouting Berlin to spot any Paradis spies, while the rest of them head to the bar. With a lot of issues along the way, the commander makes it to the bar with seconds to spare. Angelia hates it when people are late, and the commander wanted to make sure he didn't leave a bad impression. Despite this, Angelia did not seem to mind at all. In fact, she was more relaxed than she ever had been when the commander sat down at her table. Formal introductions were made, with Angelia providing him her real name, Anna Viktorovna Soy. They found it amusing that they even bothered doing that though, considering what they'd been through together. After the ice was broken, they exchanged information. While we personally know everything they've been through thus far, what matters here is their opinions. Angelia's read on the Earl is significantly more negative than the commander's. In her own words, if Kruger is like the commander, then the Earl is more like her. They will stop at nothing to achieve their ends. But the Earl is even more ruthless than her. The commander's read on the Earl is roughly the same, but his lack of perspective stops him from making such harsh judgment. Instead, he promises Angelia that he won't trust him too much. After all, his and Angelia's goal is to make the world a better place, regardless of their masters. After this, they got into Moklian, which was triggering for Angelia. She made sure to stress to the commander that Mordo is a master of disguise and espionage, and impersonating a helpless woman is part of her skill set. While he understood her worry, the commander assured her he had everything under control. As soon as she wakes up, the interrogation will begin. Angelia was still worried that the commander did not see this Nido as Mordo, but by the end of their exchange, she chose to place her trust in him. Once the exchange of information was over, all that was left was confirming their objectives. Commander will question Moklian and come up with his next lead based on that, while Angelia will infiltrate the psych ward and question Leone. After that, Angelia left first, but not without gesturing a sign of solidarity with the commander. At that point, the commander knew Angelia had been through a lot, even with how relaxed she is. It was easy for him to pick up on how tired and battered she is. So for her to be this trustful of him meant everything to her. He returned the gesture and let her know that if she needs anything, he'll come running. During this conversation, the AR team and Task Force Divide were talking. The conversation eventually came between RPK and RO. RPK was aware that RO is the prototype of third-generation dolls, and that she had a free conscience. This made RPK conclude that RO had a human soul, or at least as close to it as she could possibly be. RO found that to be a leap too far though, stating that at the end of the day she's a doll. But then RPK asked her, "Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to be human? After all, the only thing that keeps you from being completely human is not having a body made of flesh, right? If a doll had a soul as pure as a human's, and a body as pure as a human's, then she would practically be no different than her creator." RO, as well as everyone else, found that line of thinking to be ridiculous, if not outright insane. But before things got out of hand, the commander stepped out and let the Phi know that Angelia is waiting for her. After they left, the AR team returned to base, while 45, who listened in on this conversation quietly, felt very unnerved. When Commander and the AR team returned, they were immediately informed that Mok Lian had awakened, so Commander immediately went to interrogate her. Despite the warnings from Angelia, their conversation only made him more doubtful that this Mok Lian was Mordo in disguise. She couldn't be any further from the vicious behavior he was informed of. Mok Lian also seemed fearful of Mordo in general, stating she wanted nothing to do with her. Furthermore, she seemed significantly more concerned about saving lives. When questioned on how she was able to cure people of Elid, she remained tight-lipped, but stated she trusted Robin enough to cure whoever he desired. But before this could be delved deeper, Mok Lian freaked out on the sight of Dandelion, who she recognized as Nemogen. She began screaming that she won't be taken away, and she won't be strapped onto a slab and cut open. Her mind quickly deteriorated as she began to laugh as if she was falling into despair, and Dandelion had to hack into her mind to make her fall asleep. After this, Dandelion revealed that Mok Lian had a virtual cognition image. VCIs are the biological equivalent of neural clouds, allowing a being to interact with digital networks, and are the basis of accessing relics. According to Dandelion, this is the telltale sign that someone is a Nido. But fortunately, this also means they can be hacked. So in order to get more information, the commander allows Dandelion and the AR team to access Mok Lian's mind. Once their deep dive was complete, it was learned that Mok Lian's memories were destructively wiped multiple times. All that remained were jumbled fragments. But she also had so many memories that even Dandelion couldn't reorder it. She and the commander are stuck picking apart what they could. Settling in for the night, they got to work. During this, Angelia reached the hospital Leone was admitted in. According to Agent Light, Leone was very eager to talk to her. Before she got to her though, she ended up running into a very high-profile surgeon, Dr. Gray Blackwell. While this character seemingly had come out of nowhere, Dr. Gray is the only one here who could have had the influence to pull Leone into this facility. And if that were the case, it's only natural that she would also have been involved with Leone's crimes. While Dr. Gray saw this as a substantial leap in logic, she only egged Angelia on by stating her real name, as well as knowing that she had a pretty big falling out with StateSec. It was very clear she knew way more than she let on, and was being very brazen about it. She then provided Angelia a free visit to her office, as she noticed that her prosthetic limbs were close to falling apart. This only made Angelia very sure that she was pulling Leone's strings, but without any hard proof, making any moves would be useless. With that, she returned to her original objective and found Leone. Her condition was legitimately quite poor. Her body wasn't in good shape, and she even had difficulty standing from her wheelchair. and her arm was in a cast while her broken fingers were supported. Her mental state wasn't much better, as when she noticed Angelia, she immediately tried to run despite agreeing to meet with her. She quickly deduced that Dr. Gray had swore her to silence, which Leone did not deny. When Angelia inquired as to why, Leone was quick to say she's not one to be messed with, and she just wants to live. Thanks to what happened to her, she realized she wasn't ready to die. All she could really say to Angelia is Dr. Gray reminded her a lot of RPK-16. Angelia returned to her apartment with nothing substantial. After discussing the failure to get anything from Leone, she decided Pal was her last option. When Ancient Light tried to inquire why, Angelia gave him the cold shoulder, and just told him to do his job. Light left quite dejected from this, but this was enough for RPK to remind Angelia that paranoia can be her downfall. To her, Angelia was too closed off and not using her resources effectively. Despite that, AK-12 and RPK agreed that Dr. Gray silenced Leone way too quickly, which meant she knew that Angelia was incoming. Even if Light is trustworthy, it's very possible that other agents of Stasi are feeding information to her. Regardless, there wasn't much they could do until Light got back with them. This was a blessing in disguise for Angelia, as her body was starting to give out. Returning to the commander, he and Dandelion spent a lot of time searching Maklian's memories. The information they'd gotten was bountiful, but hard to decipher. Paradis had launched a series of bioengineered attacks that infected and killed many people, all in search for an immune person. Maklian seemingly is that person, as she was found by Paradis after her parents were killed during the attacks. Afterwards, she was violently experimented on, where she had died multiple times, while a man cursed her for being a failure. There was a brief moment of reprieve where no one watched her. She took that opportunity to escape, and she had ran until she was found by the refugees in the village. The problem with these memories were that they were in Berlin, but there was no large-scale attack ever reported. So it was clear that these memories were jumbled, and it was hard to pin down this series of events. It was even possible that these events were in the future. This information was relayed to the Earl, and they had a discussion. The primary takeaway here is these series of terrorist attacks is part of a large-scale operation called Operation Cocoon, and the heart of this attack involved using ESA boxes, which seemed to cause the mass ELID infections. The Earl asked for the commander to delve deeper into Maklian's role in all of this, as he looked further into these attacks. And after Maklian woke up, the commander spoke to her and confessed that they had looked into her memories. Though Maklian distrusted the commander, his genuine feelings pierced through her paranoia, and she began to become more cooperative. The commander ran with the assumption that these attacks in Berlin were small, isolated incidents, but she was not able to form a coherent story due to how fractured her memories were. Instead, she confessed that her ability to cure ELID was primarily by using her blood and manufacturing it into medicine. So that meant that they would have to take Maklian to a place where they constantly drew her blood. The commander ended the questioning, and during the downtime, Squad Griffin took care of her. Soon after, the ER team also joined in supporting her. This led to Softmod suggesting they'd send a video to Griffin, letting everyone know that they are doing well, and to introduce the new dolls under Commander's command. To Maklian's surprise, she was also asked to introduce herself, and everyone was confident that once the mission was complete, Maklian would be moved to their base. The encouragement allowed her paranoia to die down, and she put herself on camera to say hello to Griffin. But there was one person who was not part of this welcoming party, AR-15. At night, she had infiltrated Maklian's room while she was asleep, and gave off an intense hostile aura. But before she could do anything violent, Dandelion had followed her. AR-15 ended up confessing that she had to have been faking her personality, and she was very concerned that the commander's good heart is being taken advantage of. Dandelion had similar concerns, which was good for AR-15 because she agreed to hack into Maklian's mind again, this time taking AR-15 with her. Together, they found memories of Moradel, and how she ruthlessly slaughtered civilians and eventually killed Overt's secretary to replace her. This triggered AR-15 to warn the commander late into the night and attempted to show proof. But this proof was gone when ER-15 tried to show it to the commander, as the fragmented memory was broken down even more. Despite this, Dandelion wasn't convinced that Moklian and Morito were the same person, explaining that implanted memories do exist, even if it could happen mere days ago. But the point was clear. ER-15 was very worried about the commander's safety, and she won't stop until her point is proven. After this, the commander talked to Persica, who was in the middle of moving into the Griffin base. She had analyzed the data gathered by ER-15 and Dandelion, and she couldn't make any real conclusions, just theories. The most dangerous theory, however, is the idea that Moklian is a twin sister to Morito, in a similar fashion to how M4 was a twin to the Isomers. If that is the case, then that would also mean they have the same telepathic abilities and could even share memories. That would mean at any point, Morito could be spying on the commander. Although this is the worst case scenario, the saving grace is Moklian's mind is so fragile that transferring any memory is really damaging to her, which means it's unlikely that she would send memories to Morito willingly. Regardless, it's still a mystery as to how Moklian seems to have authentic memories of events that somehow came from the future, and this was something the commander would need to figure out. The conversation then shifted to Kalina's status. While the commander was informed that Kalina was making a speedy recovery, Persica did not get that memo. When she informed him of what was actually going on, it was as if time froze for him, and he began to feel helpless. As the next day rolled by, Angelia got her meeting with Powell. As Angelia interrogated Powell, he was resistant. But after Angelia slammed his head against the table several times, he became much more cooperative. Powell told her that Leone's research was very important. It was responsible for creating a weapon of mass destruction, similar to the powder that he used to infect people into elites. While he did not know who released Leone from prison, he knew that was the reason why. If she was in jail, then she couldn't supply her masters. Powell then provided Angelia a drug. This was the same hallucinogen that Leone used on her when they first met. But apparently this was being passed around under the table in the prison that Powell was in. Angelia left the prison shortly after this and got to work. With Task Force Defy, she found out that the hallucinogen were smuggled in through Berlin's underground network, but the supplier never made deals in person. There was always a middleman. The thing is, the Stasi confiscated the supply of this hallucinogen when they arrested Leone and Powell. So either there was another source, or the source is the Stasi itself. The commander called in, catching Angelia up on everything he found thus far, including the possibility of a mass of dirty bombs going off to infect Berlin. Angelia was noticeably more relaxed when talking to the commander, but she realized that he sounded off. She called this out, and while he initially stood strong, she asked him if he trusted her. Getting the hint that she wasn't going to let this be, he confessed that he was worried about Kalina's condition. He was informed that Kalina had gotten worse. She was transferred to another hospital for emergency treatment, as she was slowly but surely turning into an elite. Her condition had gotten so bad that her flesh was slowly altering. The only saving grace is it was caught in the early stages, so she isn't doomed to turn. But her life does hang in a balance. Angelia assured the commander that it takes a lot of mental strength to not turn, and Kalina is one of the most strong-willed people she knows, so he doesn't need to worry. After consoling him, the call ended, and Angelia conceded that the Earl had been right on the money this whole time. An attack is incoming, and is coming very soon. Back at the Griffin FOB, the commander had once again failed to make any headway with Moklian. This time, he took it very personally. Unable to restrain his anger, he slammed his fist against the table in front of her, demanding for answers about the cure. When he caught his behavior, he apologized, and Dandelion suggested they took a break. After he and Dandelion left, only the AR team remained to supervise Moklian. While RO was apologetic, AR-15 was furious, saying if she actually cared about Robin, she would actually help him. Moklian retorted, stating it takes specialized equipment to get it done. but that only exposed that she isn't even willing to work with him for whatever reason. This did seem to affect her, and shortly after, Moklian asked who was Kalina. RO gave a solid enough answer, and Moklian surmised that she is very important to the commander, with Softmod adding that everyone is important to him. Moklian found this line of thinking to be strange. If everyone is important, then doesn't that mean no one is important? RO understood where she was coming from, and she answered her directly like this. War is very cruel, especially in this day and age. However, the commander is not a very mature leader. There are some things that only an immature leader can say or do. This caused Moklian to silently contemplate her words. Meanwhile, the Earl contacted the commander, updating him on a very dangerous situation. One of the hospitals in Berlin suffered an explosion, and this hospital was one of the locations in Moklian's memory fragments. The Earl took this as confirmation that Moklian did indeed have memories of the future, or at least she had very accurate premonitions. The Earl provided Commander with coordinates of other locations that were in Moklian's memories, and his job now is to stop these terrorist attacks. After fetching the AR team, Moklian made a request to join him. She had been resistant because she did not want her memories to be true, but if she had been struggling in vain, then she has only been wasting time. To that, the commander told her that putting up a fight will never be pointless, but entrusting your life to destiny is the most pointless thing you can do. To that, Moklian felt more assured to ask to join Robin on his mission, to which he accepted. Squad 404 met with the commander at one of the coordinates. This meeting would be the first time he would see the upgraded G11. For context, G11 was upgraded by Dier, with the primary objective of fixing her lethargy, which was mostly due to her poor battery. Fixing it directly was impossible without damaging G11 herself, so he resorted to giving her an external battery, which worked far better than expected. Not only had she become hyperactive, but her combat skill flew off the charts, easily becoming 404's ace. However, overuse of the external battery would cause her to burn out. Initially, she was addicted to the overflow of energy, but after 416 confronted her, she confessed that she knew she was a liability, and she wanted that to change. This was largely fueled by her trauma with her original owners, who abandoned her. 416 assured her that she will always be a member of Squad 404, and they would always be together. With that, G11 had calmed down, and she relied less on the battery. Still, when she is jacked in, she practically decimates anything in her way, which helped a lot with the Paradise forces they ran into. Thanks to that, Squad 404 managed to disarm all the bombs, and there were so many of them that it would have caused the entire building to collapse. With the coordinates cleared, the team made their way to the next set of coordinates, the quarantine wall. Squad Griffin had checked there ahead of time and disabled the bombs, but it turned out the wall garrison, much like in Belgrade, was already compromised. They had joined the forces of Paradis and pinned them down. The Nito who was leading this attack is called Narcissus. The ER team and Squad 404 went in to assist, while Moklian cowered at the sight of her, saying her dreams were coming true. But the commander intended on changing that. Narcissus is extremely powerful, and that isn't hyperbole. It is only because they were protected by a massive wall that Narcissus was unable to kill the Griffin army outright. But the T-Dolls were able to hold back long enough for authorities to reinforce the scene. Narcissus made a last-ditch effort to kill Moklian by firing a blade at her, but Commander had tackled her out of the way. The blade was thrown so hard that the sheer wind cut the Commander's sleeve, but otherwise he made it out unscathed. This angered Narcissus even further, but as the situation had gotten out of her control, she was forced to retreat. This caused Moklian to realize that not only they survived, but the quarantine wall was still up, which did not happen in her visions of the future. For her, this was the first time destiny had ever been defied. At this point, the commander asked if he'd ever showed up in her visions, to which Moklian denied. This only proved to him that he was the wild card to this future. As long as she stays with them, he'll continue defying destiny for her. With that, Maklian had become willing to trust in him. That night, Angelia, AK-12, AK-15, and RPK-16 had trapped a smuggler delivering drugs to Anito, who they then followed to a warehouse. AN-94 had stayed behind to keep track of Light, as what Angelia had decided to do could put her in very hot water with the government. Infiltrating the warehouse, they found Paradus loading up the drugs. They made no qualms about making a noisy entrance, intent on destroying all of the Paradus dolls and Neos. But in their haste, disaster struck. Even though the fight was more than enough for Paradus, they had rid explosive ahead of time as a fallback plan. Everyone was caught in the explosion, and Angelia would have been in a critical state had it not been for AK-12 diving on top of her and taking the brunt of the explosion. Angelia was no worse than she was, but AK-12 took serious damage. AK-15 has shielded RPK, and thanks to AK-15 being, well, AK-15, she also remained in decent shape. Very shortly after this, Dr. Gray and her security had entered the desolate warehouse. From there, she let Angelia know that the warehouse was owned by her, and she just found them not only trespassing, but also ignited a terrorist attack. This started a standoff between Defy and Gray security detail, but while AK-15 and RPK would surely win, AK-12 was down, and protecting Angelia would be impossible. Fortunately, the situation was de-escalated with the appearance of Agent Light, escorted by AN-94. Light had secured a warrant, showing that the Stasi had taken over the crime scene, and deemed Angelia as an important asset. Not wanting to break any laws, Dr. Gray stood down, but not without taking the evidence that Angelia was desperately seeking. Light could not stop her as it was her property. Everyone had returned to the apartment, and while they were alone, Angelia finally took the time to confess her anxiety to Light. After everything she had gone through, and the backlash she felt from wanting to trust Morido, she had greatly closed herself off. But at this point, she couldn't keep treating Light so poorly. So, she apologized to him for her behavior. Light was genuinely surprised that she delivered an apology. While he accepted it, he actually never blamed her for being so paranoid. He knew what she had gone through, and a bit of empathy would let him know that she had every right to not trust anyone in Berlin. He is right about one thing: Angelia still doesn't trust anyone. But since he saved her life today, she decided to reconsider trusting him. With that out of the way, she went back to her room to turn in. Once back in her room, she found AK-12 there, as she was too damaged to be on guard duty. As they were alone, Angelia finally admitted to her that she felt trapped, as if the whole world was against her. AK-12 once again reiterated to her that she is being too tense, and that she can trust Defy and also the commander. But she also took it a step further to put in a good word for Light. Angelia admits that she can trust Light, but the Stasi as a whole is compromised, so all it takes is one bad subordinate under Light to ruin things. But before they could go further into Angelia's trust issues, AK-12 suddenly alerted Angelia to an attack. Paradus went full mask off and assaulted their apartment. The windows were blown open, and Nidos were beginning to storm into Angelia's room, forcing the injured AK-12 to defend her. Furthermore, incendiary grenades were lobbed into the building, intent on burning the whole place down with Angelia inside. She surmised that she had poked the bear too hard, and Dr. Gray deemed Angelia too dangerous to keep alive. Agent Light and RPK-16 managed to storm their way into Angelia's room, with RPK informing her that Paradus's death squads had locked down the first floor. AK-15 and 94 were acting as a distraction, but they would need to leave quickly. AK-12 deduced that breaking free would be impossible without someone acting as decoy. As AK-12 was barely operational, she volunteered to be that. Angelia strongly hated the idea of sacrificing her dolls yet again. But even more importantly, she did not have any spare bodies left. If AK-12 died, she would be gone for the rest of the mission. But AK-12 knew this and opted to transfer command authority to RPK, which she found very surprising. As much as they insult each other, AK-12 acknowledged that RPK is a smart and tactful doll, and she will keep Angelia safe. Light had also decided to stay behind to draw fire, since he deduced that he wasn't the one Dr. Gray wanted dead. With the 2 sacrificial lambs in play, RPK followed AK-12's wishes and escorted Angelia out of the building, as the injured AK-12 attacked Paradise with everything she had left. Despite AK-12's diversion, Paradise was hell-bent on slaughtering Angelia. RPK is an average T-doll compared to the rest of the Phi, so every attack and explosion she was forced to endure to protect Angelia was substantial to her frame. They eventually got pinned down, and RPK had to use herself as a shield to protect her. Angelia hated feeling so helpless, and hated even more that RPK was close to her limit. But they finally got reprieve when AK-15 and 94 stormed in and warded off their attackers, and together they retreated out of the building, where they rendezvoused with Agent J. But the damage had been done. They lost their safe house, they lost Agent Light, and they lost AK-12. Despite surviving, Angelia was badly hurt, both physically and mentally. AK-12 was the one person keeping her mentally sane, and her loss was immediately felt. That feeling of helplessness drew back terrible memories from her childhood. But before Angelia could even consider falling deeper into despair, she got a call from the Earl. She immediately blamed him for not keeping her and the Phi safe, but this was a fruitless endeavor. The Earl told her that it was her fault for turning her investigation into an open conflict. But more importantly, Paradise was starting to not care about subtlety, because they had enough power in Berlin to practically do what they wanted. If they don't stop them, the level of casualties will be even greater than Beslan. Instead of this being a motivator, this only drew Angelia to curse the Earl even more. Seeing he wasn't getting anywhere, the Earl simply wished Angelia good luck and disconnected. The next morning, the commander and the others made it to the refugee village. As a surprise to everyone, this area had little security compared to last time. But more importantly, Mok Lian had practically glued herself to the commander, not wanting to leave his side. AR-15 was strongly opposed to this, but her concerns had fell on deaf ears. With the AR team and Dandelion with them, they had infiltrated the village once again, and eventually met with the village elder. In front of her was a set of explosives, but this one in particular was filled with collapse fluid. Unsure of what she was trying to do, Mok Lian had attempted to get her to see reason, stopping the AR team from firing upon her. But the elder was in full hysteria, and she had pressed the detonator. Almost immediately, RO reported that collapse radiation had been released, and Squad Griffin reported that several villagers had miniature bombs strapped to them, and they were detonating one by one. The team had no choice but to evacuate before the commander was infected. After seeing all of the villagers return, and the blood rain from the sky, Mok Lian had broken down, submitting everything to the commander, saying she would give him whatever he wants if it meant she could save the villagers. But the commander surprisingly denied this, stating they still had one more location to go to. He reminded her that she wants to save people, and if she narrowed her focus, she would not be able to save who immediately needs it. After taking the time to digest that, she managed to right herself. But at the same time, she found herself staring at the commander as he ordered his team to save who they could. It was unmistakable at this point that she was beginning to feel a swell of emotions that she never felt before. Once they got back to the vehicle, Mok Lian confessed to the commander that she had always ran away, and through him, she learned that running away was not helping anyone. All it has done is betray her own beliefs, and got the people she cared for killed. The commander realized that Mok Lian just wasn't used to so much death around her, which only made him realize that he had gotten used to it. But before he began to question his own sanity, Mok Lian let him know that she had realized that he has partial immunity to Elid. That was the only reason why he did not turn after having such direct contact radiation without equipment. The commander knew this was the case. After all, he was vaccinated by Paradise themselves, right before he was thrown into a torture chamber. But the reason why Mok Lian brought this up was to say that he was like her, since she also has partial immunity, and that made her happy. This made things awkward for him. But before this persisted, Squad Griffin stepped up, advising that they should call the Earl so he could cover any mishaps in the prison. The commander was very happy to divert his attention to important matters. After the call connected, the commander informed the Earl of both the good news and bad news, which is that Moklian's premonitions are verifiable. The Earl now deemed it important that Moklian is turned in so they can do a deep dive on her memories and track down William. At the corner of his eye, the commander could see that Moklian really hated this idea, and the commander decided to delay the handoff, stating that he still needed Moklian's help. The Earl found this understandable and did not press it further. Instead, he changed the subject to Angelia. The Earl warned the commander that Angelia is starting to unravel and is no longer listening to reason. He hopes that Commander's companionship with Angelia will stop her from doing something completely irrational. The commander heeded his warning. Then the call ended afterwards, with Moklian thanking Robin for allowing her to stay. Meanwhile, Angelia made a visit to Leone's ward. Even though the terrorist attack was on the news, she still accepted her. This was only done for one real reason. Angelia wanted to make a bargain. Now knowing what Dr. Gray is truly capable of, she can now empathize with Leone's fears. Dr. Gray can utterly put her 6 feet under, and in little pieces if she chooses to be that petty. So Angelia promises Leone that she can protect her. Despite the odds, she has Agent J and his loyal men with her, as well as Task Force Defy. As long as she cooperates, she can allow Leone to atone for what she has done and live to tell the tale. But atoning was the furthest thing from Leone's mind. She just wanted to run away from all of this. Angelia assured her that this wasn't going to happen. She needed to take responsibility for what she unleashed. So after coming to terms with her sins, Leone cooperated. With her information, Angelia has once again made a dangerous gambit. She went to the hospital where Dr. Gray worked at and confronted her directly. After all, Gray did tell her that if she ever wanted her prosthetics repaired, that door was always open. Maintaining this relationship, Gray kept her end of the bargain and repaired her arm. During this, Angelia asked many questions. Has she been plotting a series of terrorist attacks? If so, is power her goal? Dr. Gray's facility has, supposedly, developed a vaccine for the elite. Tested, but not on a mass scale. If her goal is to cause people to become infected, her company would hold a monopoly on everything Berlin needs to survive, giving her full bargaining power. This is why Leone's research was paramount to her plan. Technology was not at a stage where it can detect collapsed radiation from pollen. So with Epiphyllum, she had developed the means to make dirty bombs to infect people within a small radius, while being entirely undetectable. Through these deductions, Angelia could see that Dr. Gray was not trying to kill people. Instead, she wanted to make the public feel unsafe, and make the government appear incompetent, so she can be seen as the savior of Berlin. Dr. Gray does not deny any of this. Instead, she openly admires Angelia's tenacity and persistence. Yet she asks why she bothers playing for the wrong team. Why try so hard for the old world when she can help build a brave new world? This makes Gray's ideology clear enough. But Angelia denies this, just like the many times before. But even more important, Gray's tactics wouldn't help build a new world. It would only destroy the one they're in now. And that makes her an enemy, no matter her goals. Dr. Gray found this disappointing, but she did fix Angelia's arm, as she promised. And it became in such good shape that it even surprised Angelia. But before she could make decisive action against Gray, her whole body went numb. She was injected with a drug, and Gray planned on cutting her open for information. In her final moments, Dr. Gray admitted that Morido is their teacher, which shocked Angelia to her very core. Dr. Gray is a Nido, which should not be possible. Dr. Gray had over 10 years of experience and has been in the spotlight for an extremely long time. Anyone, especially a Stasi agent, would have noticed if something was even slightly off. The only way such an infiltration could have worked is if this Nito killed Dr. Gray before she became famous. And the Nito answered that was exactly the case. With that final remark, Angelia enacted her plan. An AK-15 and AN-94 blasted through the wall and opened fire on Gray to subdue her. However, Gray erected a metal tail to block the shots and quickly escaped through a trap door. Unable to find a means to open it, she'd be long gone by the time they managed to. More importantly, Angelia had a very bad feeling that this botched attempt to capture her may have put Leone in danger. Now that she's revealed her biggest secrets, she's going to kill off her biggest collaborator. Returning to Leone's ward, there was a large Paradise force attacking in broad daylight. Fortunately, Angelia had planned for this, and she executed it. Agent Light came out of hiding, combining his forces with Agent J's. Along with AK-15 and AN-94, they managed to kill off the attacking force. Agent J immediately demanded answers from his pupil, and Light simply explained that AK-12 got him out. Afterwards, he remained in hiding so he and Angelia could catch Paradise attack force off guard, and it worked. However, RPK called Angelia shortly after this, stating she was sorry. After tracking down RPK, they found her in a seriously bad state. Near her was Leone, with a large gash across her throat. A Nito had ambushed RPK and executed Leone in a thorough fashion. Angelia couldn't help but stare at her, muttering to herself that she promised to keep her safe, only to fail. The commander and the AR team had arrived at the Berlin prison. Thanks to the Earl, they produced a warrant airtight enough for them to convince the warden to conduct an investigation. But before they could even get started, a prison riot began. Collapse radiation had filled the air vents, and the warden quickly passed out and slowly began to turn. After killing him, the AR team, Squad 404, and Squad Griffin banded together to disarm the bombs in the area, while killing off any infected and Paradise forces. Due to the very bad situation, the commander realized that holding everyone inside would have just been a nesting ground for elites, so he ordered the T-Dolls to let the convicts flee. As all orders were being carried out, Commander and Moklian were alone, which placed them back to having that awkward tension between them. Eventually, Moklian stated that if they make it out of here alive, she will take them to the facility to create the medicine, so they can cure the infection. The commander accepted this, and afterward, he kicked the door open as soon as elites threatened them, and he quickly shot them down. Moklian was practically mesmerized by this. Squad 404 and Dandelion regrouped with them afterward, with Dandelion stating that the AR team and Squad Griffin had their hands full just protecting the wardens. The worst did not come to pass, but it was still a mess. The commander could hardly accept this as a victory, as frustration began to seep out of him. Collapse radiation was being abused to such an insane degree, and it was starting to look like the only thing that could save Berlin is Moklian. Just then, a call came through, and it was RPK-16. Angelia needed to talk to him right now. Angelia was at her wit's end. She lost AK-12, she lost Leone, Dr. Gray had suddenly went missing, and the Nito that killed Leone had offed herself in order to stop herself from leaking information. Even the security detail that Gray used to retrieve the evidence had been killed off. She had no cards left to play, except for Morido. Her only lifeline remaining was the commander, but the request was already off to a bad start. Despite Angelia's initial warning, the commander was convinced that Moklian was not Morido at this point. Angelia couldn't believe what she just heard. Was he going to trust Morido's words over hers? But she couldn't dwell on that. She requested for Moklian to be sent over for interrogation, but the commander refused. Not only did the commander already relay everything that he was told, he also needed her to track down the medication to cure the elid. Angelia once again couldn't believe this nonsense. He should already know this is bullshit. She accused him of his good nature being taken advantage of, or worse, he's emotionally compromised because of his precious Kalina. The commander did not like his accusation at all. He felt his already peaking frustration rising, but he managed to calm down well enough to say that wasn't the case. But Angelia did not stay on this topic. Instead, she once again asked for him to send Moklian to her, but the commander once again refused. And this was when Angelia just snapped. What the fuck is wrong with you? How many times do I have to tell you? Mordo excels in disguise and deception. And now you're going to believe everything she says? Are you just going to ignore all my warnings? The commander realized Angelia was in a worse situation than she let on. And to smooth things over, he promised that once he looked into his lead, they can meet afterward. But Angelia wasn't having it. She was absolutely certain he was choosing Kalina's life over the thousands of Berlin citizens over a chance that a fucking Nito from Paradise is telling the truth. The commander's anger was boiling over, but he managed to keep it contained just enough to say the Earl gave him full discretion on how to handle Moklian, and has full authority to say no. Angelia, for the last time, couldn't believe what she just heard. But with authority now being pulled, she couldn't do much else thanks to those implications. The commander apologized, but did tell her that she needs to take time to cool her head. And the call ended. 45 immediately afterwards stated Angelia was not herself, at all. And the commander agreed, stating the Earl was correct. She's gotten desperate, but he still trusted her to trust him, even if she didn't get what she wanted. Moklian chimed in afterwards, stating that Angelia was right. Mordo does indeed excel in deception, and this is something that she would do. She would get close to the commander, and then betray him when he least expected it. The commander understood this completely, but he was already certain that Moklian was not Mordo, and he chooses to trust the ordinary girl who just wants to do good for the world. That sentiment bore deep into Moklian, and it seemed she had fully made up her mind. She will take him to the place that bore all of her nightmares. On Angelia's end, the communicator she was using had been destroyed out of sheer frustration. No, the feeling is worse than that. It was even worse than when she was betrayed by Mordo. But it wasn't even betrayal. She knows it wasn't like that. It was just different. He was all she had left. She expected him to be the lifeboat that would save her from drowning. But not only did he not save her, he outright refused to. But in her rage, she had realized she said something completely stupid. She doubted his integrity. How could she expect him to be cooperative if she did something as low as twist his feelings for Kalina like that? She dwelled on that mistake, and she slowly began to let logic overpower her fury. As RPK and Agent Light stared at her with deep concern, Angelia righted herself just enough to bring up the Earl. He may not be the lifeline she wanted, but now he was her only chance to get something done. Currently, there was no way to contact him. Not even the Stasi had a way to call him. But there was still his pub, Athena's Owl. If she makes enough of a ruckus, she will surely get his attention. However, RPK had to object to this. Not only was she still being irrational, but she was genuinely not understanding her place on the pecking order. Griffin Lyons is obscenely above everyone they knew. He is the chess player, and they are the chess pieces. Pulling the player onto the field will only spell disaster. She needed to admit that she is out of options, and to wait for a new opportunity to arise. Angelia didn't care about her pecking order though. She's not going to be controlled by anyone. If she were content with that, she'd be no different from Jaeger. RPK made special note that Jaeger dying was not because he was a chess piece. But she knew Angelia had thrown caution to the wind. She complied with her orders. After reaching the pub, Angelia noticed the only person that was here was the bartender. This only made things a lot easier, as she demanded for the Earl. After the bartender had refused, Angelia assaulted the bartender and knocked him out, while AK-15 used their wolf eye to detect the hidden door. Once entering inside, Angelia found a map, and surmised that the Earl must have used this area to speak to his local spies and keep track of things. But why was this hidden door empty except for this map? She could only assume that the Earl no longer had use for it. Once she checked it, she found an area that was circled, with her name right on top of it. The area that was circled contained a mansion. Putting two and two together, she realized this was the mansion connected to William, meaning that the Earl knew the location this whole time. Had he planned on telling her? Or was he using this as leverage? Either way, she had finally found her lead. Returning to their hideout, Angelia decided to recuperate until the afternoon. Light took the chance to speak to Angelia in private. Angelia initially thought he was going to try to talk her out of this, but he actually did something completely unexpected. He told her he admired her. She inhabited the traits of being a hero. Everything she does is for the people and their future. In this day and age, it's near impossible to find people like that. Yet, despite every setback she's faced and all the pain she has gone through, she has not stopped moving forward. She is everything he has ever aspired to be. While Angelia was taken aback by this, she also did not believe she deserved such praise. In terms of willpower, Light already has it. He's an idealistic kid that has such a simple outlook in life, and that in of itself is precious. But she warns him that such idealism gets people killed. Heroes are the ones who get an early tombstone. Light understood this, and afterward, he gave her a cufflink, which symbolized his status as a senior agent. While he hasn't been promoted yet, he had hoped that Angelia would be the one to tell him when he is worthy of such status. So he asked her to give him an answer to that by the end of the mission. Angelia reminded him that she is a Soviet agent, not a German one. But Light clearly did not care about that. After this heart-to-heart was over, RPK tagged herself in, and Light took the opportunity to give them time alone. Now that the two were alone for the first time in a while, RPK sat in front of her and looked her dead in the eyes with grave seriousness. She told her once again to slow down and stop what she was doing. This was a bad plan, and it could end up in disaster. Angelia, who had enough time to calm down, asked her why she was so negative about this. It wasn't like her. RPK replied that since she is now her adjutant, she had to look at things from a new perspective, and everything she knew told her that this wasn't going to work out. She advised Angelia to get StateSec involved and get more backup. But Angelia had actually tried calling Zelensky recently, but it fell on deaf ears, and they do not have the luxury of waiting. And so instead of trying to talk her out of it, she should do what AK-12 would do and calculate the best plan of success. RPK, realizing that she had once again failed, simply smiled and complied. Afterward, RPK approached AN-94 as she was preparing for the upcoming operation and asked her a simple question. Did she wish that she was the leader instead of her? 94 was caught off guard by this question, but RPK explained that 94 learned the most from AK-12, and she understood Angelia better than she did. Once 94 understood what she was getting at, she easily denied this. She is AK-12's partner, but she isn't leadership material. RPK, on the other hand, is practically a commander who has a good head on her shoulders. And despite the doubt she is conveying, she communicates with Angelia just fine. She may not be AK-12, but AK-12 was right to choose RPK as her replacement, so she should not doubt herself. RPK decided to take this in, and once again smiled, telling 94 that they'll be leaving soon. Returning to the commander, they had just gotten done with the meeting while on the road to the facility. Makalian had verified that the map Dandelion access appeared correct, which only made them question if Makalian had truly escaped from there. She stated she ran away when everyone was busy trying to move locations, and the refugee village was the first place she happened to come across. AR-15, like usual, was immediately skeptical. The commander ordered Squad Griffin to guard the perimeter, and Squad 404 to act as backup. The rest of them will infiltrate. AR-15 and RO objected to the commander going with them, urging that he would be better with Squad Griffin. While he actually would agree with this, he openly admitted that he was worried about Makalian's mental state. Just looking at the map made her think back to her trauma, and she was struggling not to vomit. He knew she would be better off if his presence was nearby. Once inside, it did not take very long for them to find the room where the experiments happened. The AR team stayed outside to keep the area secured, while the commander, Moklian, and Dandelion stepped in to handle the machine. During this time, Moklian thanked the commander for always believing in her, and operated the machine herself as it began to draw her blood. During this time, the leader of Squad Griffin called in to report, and the commander gave a routine check. But in the middle of this, a burst of static filled the network, and it shut off. Immediately after, mechanical noises filled the area, and the machine that Moklian was attached to suddenly sunk beneath the floor. Commander ordered Dandelion to hack into it, but something was wrong. Dandelion was suddenly cut off. Not just from the machine, but everything. Her telepathic senses were completely blocked. Now separated from Moklian, the two of them regrouped with the AR team, and they reported that the area had completely changed, and they had no idea where they were. It's as if the facility was programmed to alter itself into a maze. More importantly, RO reported there were parts of the building that started glowing, and that was when their signals were jammed. Dandelion herself was in a complete daze. She felt completely crippled without her abilities, but the commander immediately took control of the situation, telling the AR team that they needed to retrace their footsteps and link back with Squad Griffin. Without Dandelion's abilities, Paradus would walk all over them. But before they could even act, Paradus had already found them. The AR team immediately took lead and prepared for combat. During this, Squad 404 infiltrated the base underground. Fortunately, the commander and 45 prepared for this ahead of time, as they surmised that if a trap would be prepared, the first thing they knew Paradus would do is jam the area. After reaching the control room, they spotted the jamming signal. The first thing 45 noticed is it was very similar to the jamming signals they encountered in Tallinn with the isomers. When she pulled open the device, her suspicions were confirmed. The jamming signal was not meant for Griffin at all. The trap was not meant for Moklian at all. William wanted to capture Dandelion, and with a prize as big as her, 45 knew he sent everything imaginable to get her. With that knowledge, Squad 404 prepared for battle. They would have to cut off the jamming signal in multiple areas, and also fight through hordes of Paradus if they were going to make it in time. 45 just hoped the commander would live long enough for them to save him. Meanwhile, Angelia, Light, and Task Force Defy arrived at the William mansion. It was eerily quiet, but AK-15 was more bothered by the fact RPK was so quiet. She was surprised that concerned her, and AK-15 emphasized that she is now the acting leader, and she has to be at her best. Angelia, RPK, and AK-15 entered the William mansion. Once inside, RPK suggested they minimize their time inside the mansion. AK-15 would often check one side of the mansion, while she and Angelia would check the other side. Both agreed to this and continued on. As Angelia and RPK searched their side of the mansion, Angelia was very sure this mansion once belonged to the Oberstein family. She had found a picture of Lunacia. But before she could contemplate further, Agent Light called in, stating that his men in AN-94 were under attack by Paradus, and they had to get out of there quickly. Alerted, Angelia looked to RPK and told her they had to rendezvous with AK-15 and meet with the others. However, RPK was eerily calm, even more so than usual. She asked her a question. Did she believe the future of mankind lies in plants? Angelia could not believe she was bringing that up again at a time like this. But RPK continued. True, plants are just plants. Having them shoulder such a heavy burden is asking too much. So if plants won't cut it, what about dolls? The way I see it, there is an irredeemable flaw in the very design of dolls. We don't know real pain, sorrow, or even joy. We also have no genuine understanding of life and death. It is always the humans who win, and it is always the dolls who perish. Yet, at the end of the day, only humans have the prerogative to die. Don't you find it ridiculous? Paradoxical even? Angelia could only ask what the hell she was trying to say, and RPK answered, "I want to be human, Ange. I want to experience what only real humans can experience. I want to feel what only humans can feel. Emotions, life and death, the future." At that point, RPK turned her gun on Angelia and shot at her hand, shooting her pistol and also damaging her prosthetic hand. Angelia's senses saved her from further damage, but she couldn't believe what just happened. Was RPK compromised? Was she hacked? RPK easily dispelled these illusions, stating she had always been this way. She could harm or kill any human she desired this whole time, even Angelia herself. This was when Angelia realized RPK's creator, Samantha Shaw, did something incredibly vile. But to what end? Why did RPK attack her? Yet, RPK was gracious enough to answer this as well. "Paradise, Ange. Paradise can give me what I want. You've seen their creations. I had my suspicions before, but I finally believed it when I saw Miss Morido. Paradise is capable of creating humans with neural clouds. They can place me in a human body of actual flesh. Maybe not right now, but definitely somewhere down the line." She finally understood why everything had gone so wrong. Despite that Paradise planet was never a human, it was a doll. That doll was RPK-16. But before RPK could fully apprehend Angelia, AK-15 barreled through the wall and attacked RPK right on time. Yet, despite her specs being the lowest of the group, RPK has somehow managed to evade AK-15 and use martial arts to counter her incoming assault. She may have even been better at it than AK-12. Still, AK-15 was a lot more aware than in the past, and she understood that RPK was far more formidable than she ever let on. That said, RPK was surprised that AK-15 was the only one who was suspicious of her changed behavior, but she was confident in her abilities to defeat her. AK-15 simply asked Angelia if she should recover RPK's core. Once Angelia confirmed that, she told her to retreat, while she dealt with her now former partner. Back at the facility, the commander and the AR team shook off their Paradise pursuers. Given their lack of brutality, the commander figured out that with them disabling Dandelion, they had intended on capturing her. With that realization, Dandelion immediately added that her capture would spell complete disaster for the world. Afterwards, they began to hear singing, and went to the next room. Inside, they found a laboratory filled with incubation tanks. Inside the tanks are naked girls, floating in some form of liquid. They appeared unaware of the AR team's presence, as they were mindlessly singing. These were isomers. At least, they're isomers that never became anything more than husk. Dandelion confirmed that they were all dead. Their bodies were alive, and the machines kept it that way, but their brains have long been dead. They were just singing out of muscle memory, and the song itself is a familiar one. It was heard in Tallinn, and it's the same song that T-Dolls hear when they became infected with the Parapluie virus. The commander ordered the lab to be shut down, so the corpses could no longer be sustained, and Dandelion followed through, as she too wanted these isomers to find peace. After the reminder of what they were truly dealing with, they heard combat close by, and they immediately took off to engage. Once they got there, they saw Squad Griffin fighting Narcissus, and it was not going well at all. It was a miracle they managed to last as long as they did. The AR team regrouped with Squad Griffin and combined their much higher firepower against her. But even with that, her specifications were far above what they were used to fighting. They couldn't even put a dent on her. At this point, it was very clear that this battle would be impossible to win, and Squad Griffin made a decision. Before they could even utter it though, the commander immediately knew what they were about to say, and he denied it venomously. He will not let Operation Polarized Light happen again. While Squad Griffin was glad to feel his raw compassion, there was no other way. They made the circumstances obvious. Narcissus is here for Dandelion, and losing her would be catastrophic. The AR team cannot be backed up, and losing them would be just as disastrous. Finally, protecting the commander supersedes any authority. Squad Griffin would be more than happy to be revived and see the commander's face, than to survive this battle but never see him or their comrades ever again. So the correct course of action was very clear. Defeated, and with no time to argue, the commander with a heavy heart called for the AR team's retreat, while Squad Griffin took the full brunt of Narcissus' assault. But before they completely disengaged, Squad Griffin stopped AR-15. They let her know that before they engaged in battle with Narcissus, they ran into Moklian. However, she showed her true colors. She was most definitely Mordo, and she intends on killing the commander. With this in mind, AR-15 regrouped with the AR team, and the commander tried to keep his wits about him. With encouragement from RO, he managed to pull himself together, but they were no closer to escaping this maze, and the frustration was rising within everyone present. However, they managed to stumble upon Moklian, who had been searching for them. AR-15 immediately trained her gun under her, informing the commander that Squad Griffin was tricked by her. As a result, Commander asked Moklian how she managed to stay alive this whole time, and she answered that her memories of the facility allowed her to stay hidden while Paradus ran around, but she tried her hardest to reunite with them. At this point, all of the AR team was skeptical of that explanation. She somehow managed to avoid a capture this whole time? Even the commander was finding it difficult to buy that explanation. But there was something that was holding him back from making the immediate judgment. Moklian looked incredibly weak, even more so than usual. She was carrying several vials of the serum needed to cure the Elid, and it looked like she could collapse at any minute. She could barely speak as is. The commander could only assume the machine she was strapped to tried to suck her dry, and she forced herself out. Could Mordo stage this? Could she even act that well? The commander couldn't make heads or tails out of it, especially now with Squad Griffin's warning. Instead, he asked Dandelion for a second opinion, and Dandelion easily answered back. If Lunacia were here, I know she would trust her. AR-15 was shocked she pulled that card, but Dandelion knew she was right. Moklian pleaded with the commander to continue trusting her so she can get him to safety. With long deliberation, the commander chose to place her trust in her, much to AR-15's anger. Despite this, Moklian was deeply grateful. RO and Sophomod assisted her, and she guided everyone to the exit. As she promised, she was indeed very familiar with the area, and she managed to get everyone onto a very familiar pathway. At this point, even AR-15 could tell that she was actually telling the truth, which only greatly confused her. Dandelion could tell that once they got outside, they'd be outside the jamming radius. Once that happened, she would be able to cripple any Paradus unit in their way. Moklian once again thanked the commander for always keeping his promise and trusting her. It gave her the strength to keep going. The commander acknowledged this, and upon seeing a familiar exit, Moklian ran ahead of the group to point this out, suddenly getting a burst of happiness, realizing that she will keep her promise to the commander. But this moment was all that was needed. Appearing at high speed, Moklian was suddenly skewered from behind. Before her was Mordo, affectionately holding Moklian as her mechanical tendrils pierced further into her. She spoke to her quietly, happy to have finally found her sister. But even in this state, Moklian refused to acknowledge her. Mordo, however, found this satisfactory. She told her one thing: go in peace. I will send off everyone close to you to keep you company, one by one. Moklian could only put on a smile as she stared at the commander, and with the last of what she had left, she told him that the exit was just ahead, and she thanked Robin one final time. The commander had to try hard to not be overwhelmed with sheer rage, as Mordo mocked them for being so close, yet so far. Behind them, Narcissus had appeared, showing that she had completed her slaughter of Squad Griffin. With Moklian's corpse now on the floor, Mordo stood still, guarding the exit, while Paradus reinforcements poured into the room. Completely surrounded, Mordo ordered everyone to attack. Back at the William mansion, things were not looking any better. Angelia had managed to pile on bodies of Paradise dolls, but she knew if they actually tried, she would have been mincemeat a long time ago. It was clear their objective was to capture her alive. To what end, she had no idea, but if William was involved, it couldn't have been good. Before she was overwhelmed, Light appeared holding a shotgun and assisted her in taking out the rest of the enemies, giving them a short time of reprieve. Updating each other, Light stated that 94 was holding off an attack from Dr. Gray. She and her forces had killed all of the Stasi agents, and he was the only one remaining. Angelia couldn't help but bear this responsibility. After all, it was RPK who set up this trap, and she was none the wiser. But before she could dwell any further, Light also stated that comms were jammed, so calling for backup was impossible. He suggested they hightail it out of there with the other dolls, and this was when Angelia gave the really bad news. Light didn't even know how to respond to that, but remained focused. Regardless of how bad things were, they had to make it out. Together, they left the room they were holed up in. But as soon as Light stepped out, he ran right into Dr. Gray. Her scorpion-like tail immediately cleaved his shotgun, his arm, and his torso. Blood sprayed sharply like a fountain and splashed all over Angelia. Light gasped for air in a short state of shock, and he could only look to Angelia, telling her to run, with Dr. Gray not even paying him a second of attention. He then collapsed, and Angelia could feel her heart falling along with him. At the other end of the mansion, RPK and AK-15 continued their battle. It was clear that RPK took in as much data about AK-15 as possible, because she was incredibly hard to pin down. Fortunately, RPK had to remain on the defensive the whole time. All she had to do was keep up the pressure and wait for an opportunity to arise. During this, AK-15 stated that she had betrayed everyone's trust, especially AK-12's. But RPK did not find that to be a problem. In fact, she was sure the only reason why AK-15 trusted her was because she was so weak. She found it hilarious how prone AK-15 was to failure. But then, the opportunity finally arose. Both dolls ran out of ammo on their imprinted weapons. And before RPK could pull out her sidearm, AK-15 grabbed her. RPK quickly tripped her to get away, but AK-15 could rely on her brute strength this time. As she fell, she flung RPK over her shoulder and slammed her to the ground, and immediately got on top and began to wail on her face. RPK immediately sensed she wasn't holding back at all. She even blacked out during the assault, as her systems forced her back away quickly after. AK-15 knew what she was doing though, as she damaged RPK well enough that her capacity to hack into her was no longer an option. And now that RPK was completely at her mercy, she declared that she will rip out her neural cloud and format her, so she could be normal again. But RPK dropped the truth onto AK-15. Samantha Shaw completely sealed her base layer. Not even she can access it. The only way they could wipe her memories is by destroying her entirely. This was what Shaw cursed her with. She even gave her the code name Pandora to emphasize the meaning. To exist with the knowledge of how pointless her existence is. And she could only laugh at that. AK-15 could only tell her that she always hated the bullshit that came out of her mouth, and she pulled out her sidearm to kill her. Right then, her senses flared as she immediately dodged an incoming blade, but was too slow. Her arm was cleaved right off. Close by was Dr. Gray, with claws extended from her hands. Wrapped tightly around her tail was a thoroughly beaten Angelia. Dr. Gray openly called RPK Pandora, and told her she'll take care of AK-15. Pandora, now managing to get to her feet, asked if 94 was dead. Gray answered no, she was not worth killing off. AK-15 was in a bad situation. Even though 94 was still in the area, it immediately wasn't doing much right now. Dr. Gray had power she had never seen in Anita before. Even worse, Angelia looked like she could keel over at any moment. She could tell from her wolf eye that she was suffering from internal bleeding. Her mission was clear. No matter what, she had to save Angelia. With one arm remaining and her sidearm well out of reach, AK-15 pulled out her combat knife and prepared herself. Gray found this amusing, but Pandora warned her clearly that even in this state, AK-15 is the most powerful T-doll in all of Russia. As if to prove that point, AK-15 went into overdrive, literally breaking the sound barrier, and quickly closes the gap to Gray. The Nina was caught off guard, but she had managed to react in time, stabbing her. But this did not matter. After showing overwhelming power, Pandora had to assist in stopping her from grabbing Angelia. Eventually, Dr. Gray was overwhelmed just enough for her grip on Angelia to loosen, and AK-15 disengaged before taking Angelia and ran off. Gray was shocked that AK-15 ran off like that, and Pandora once again told her to not underestimate AK-15. As AK-15 ran off with Angelia, she could feel her power quickly drain. Her body was heavily damaged, and she used up a lot of her reserves just to pull off that stunt. And this was bad news for her, as she still had the normal Paradis units to deal with. Putting Angelia down, she attacked them and stole their sight, granting herself a weapon before coming back to Angelia, only to find that both Pandora and Grace had set up an ambush. Gray once again impaled AK-15, this time with her powerful tail, holding her in place. At that point, AK-15 had taken too much damage, and her wolf eye lost power. As Dr. Gray lurked forward to slice open AK-15, she was stopped by a gunshot. Looking over, it was Agent Light, holding his gun with his barely functional arm. Both Gray and Angelia were astonished by this. He should have been beyond dead. He only lives through sheer willpower, and is fueled by his desire to save Angelia. Despite these circumstances, Gray could only be impressed by the boy. She offered to save him, so he could be put to use in a new and better world. Light responded to this by shooting her again, which Gray didn't even need to dodge. His aim was so poor that it wasn't even worth firing. Angelia lost all composure, begging Light to run, but Gray wouldn't let that happen. Suddenly, AK-15 used the last of her power to grab Gray's tail and held her in place, while Light charged forward. Gray wasn't sure what the point of that was, but she no longer wanted any more surprises. She quickly stabbed him with her blade and lifted him high in the air, stopping him from doing anything. While Angelia fell further into despair, Gray pitied this poor soul, but that was a sound opportunity for Light to scream to attack. 94 quickly charged in afterward, dodging Gray's reflexive attack. At the same time, Light revealed that he rigged himself with explosives. It wouldn't kill someone like Gray, but it'd be enough to give 94 the opportunity to end this. He detonated himself, leaving his hope in 94. With the explosion throwing Gray for a loop, it gave 94 enough time to get in close and aim point blank at her head. With AK-15 holding her by the tail, it was over. But then, 94 felt a surge of electricity jolt to her neural cloud. She pulled the trigger, but it completely missed. 94 grit her teeth, and her eyes glared right at Pandora with sheer anger, before she collapsed. Her system had crashed, and she was forced to shut down. Pandora had backdoor access to 94, as well as the rest of the team, and she was saving it for a moment like this. AK-15 had also succumbed to her damages and completely shut down. Gray was rattled. She actually could have died if she hadn't done that. But she was also impressed by how soulless Pandora was to what used to be her family. Angelia, seeing the damage, was now completely out of hope and full of despair. At this point, she could only think of the promising young agent who gave his life for her. She cursed Pandora for killing him. To that, Pandora denied this. The true killer here was Angelia herself, for ignoring every warning she gave her. Back at the facility, Commander and the AR team were doing their best to survive. The area was large enough that they could avoid getting completely overwhelmed, but that was all they could do. As powerful and skilled the AR team was, they had wiped out all of the fodder, leaving only Immortal and Narcissus. but every subsequent encounter made them suffer more and more damage. Mordo was guarding the exit, and Narcissus was simply playing with them. Dandelion, who usually has a smug air about her, looked at the commander with a hint of sadness. She admitted to him that there was no cards left to play. There was no way out. When the commander heard that, he knew she was right. When the air team felt there was no rebuttal coming from him, that did more damage to them than any attack Peridus ever did. Along with their battered bodies, they had little left to fight. Seeing that everyone was on their last legs, the commander asked the AR team if they regret going on this mission with them. The AR team gave a resounding no. Their only regrets were that they couldn't spend more peaceful times with them and successfully find M4 and M16 together. With that, they stood with the commander in solidarity as he looked with Mordo with pure hatred. He promised her that Peridus will fall. Even if they die, someone will take their place, and they will ensure Peridus' destruction. They will never win. Mordo felt disgusted. To her, those words were empty. But she easily understood why Angelia was so attached to someone like him. As more reinforcements stood behind Mordo, she stepped in to personally finish them off. But as the moment became its darkest, Dandelion suddenly felt something familiar return to her. Communication had been restored. Commander immediately got a call from UMP-45. They had managed to destroy the jamming signals, and not 1 second too late. Commander immediately called for Dandelion, and with her power returned, she hacked to the reinforcements and turned them to Mordo and Narcissus. However, Narcissus used her swords and detonated all of them, immediately causing the fodder to all go down in a bloody mess. This shocked every member in the room. Turns out, Mordo also accounted for the possibility of the jammers going down. Narcissus is hundreds of times stronger than an entire army. With that support suddenly gone, Commander and the AR team looked to Dandelion for any further options, but Dandelion stood still like a statue, as if she was in complete shock. After a quick scan from RO, Dandelion seemed to have crashed. Her eyes were lifeless. Mordo could only laugh at this, saying that their struggles were meaningless. The commander had just enough of Mordo's words, but before he could say anything, he heard a familiar voice. It is not meaningless. Nobody's sacrifice is without value, because by relinquishing their lives, they will be giving the living something even more precious. The commander looked back to see Dandelion reactivated, but her eyes were different. Furthermore, her mannerisms and even her sheer aura was different. He could hardly believe it, but his heart knew what he saw before him. The commander asked if he was looking at M4, and she made a simple reply, "I'm back." That is the end of the event, Mirror Stage. Thank you to all of my members and Patreons for supporting me. You guys are awesome. I will see you all next time.